Blue lights shatter the midnight fog, trapping an off-duty detective in a deadly game of Simon Says. Staring down the barrel of a Glock, held by a power-hungry patrolman, he realizes his gold shield means nothing in the dark. Tonight, survival requires more than compliance, it demands a reckoning. Isaiah Montgomery was exhausted. It was the kind of bone-deep weariness that settled into a man's marrow after 14 straight hours working undercover narcotics in the city's grittiest sector. For the past 6 years, Isaiah had been a decorated detective with the 8th Precinct, a man respected by his peers and feared by the syndicates. But tonight, stripped of his tactical gear and dressed in a faded gray hoodie, relaxed-fit denim jeans, and scuffed Timberland boots, he didn't look like the hardened veteran who had orchestrated 3 major busts that quarter. He just looked like an exhausted commuter trying to get home to his empty apartment. Rain lashed against the windshield of his unmarked 2018 Ford Taurus as he navigated the slick, poorly lit streets of the West Side. The rhythm of the windshield wipers was practically hypnotizing, lulling him into a false sense of security. He was only 4 blocks from his neighborhood when the piercing glare of high-beam headlights flooded his rearview mirror, completely blinding him. A split second later, the familiar red and blue strobes ignited the darkness, accompanied by the short, aggressive whoop-whoop of a police siren. Isaiah sighed, feeling a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't swerved. His taillights were functioning perfectly. As a seasoned cop, he knew the routine, and he knew the statistics. He also knew exactly what an unmarked, older model sedan driven by a black man late at night looked like to a patrol unit looking to make a quota. Maintaining complete composure, Isaiah engaged his turn signal and slowly pulled his vehicle into the well-lit canopy of a 2 4-hour Chevron gas station. It was a tactical habit. If an encounter was going to happen, he wanted it under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, surrounded by potential witnesses and security cameras. He shifted the car into park, turned off the engine, and rolled down his driver's side window completely. He then placed both hands flat on the top of his steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position. In the side mirror, he watched the driver's side door of the cruiser swing open. Officer Derek Stafford stepped out. Even from 20 feet away, Isaiah could read the body language. Stafford was moving fast. His shoulders squared, his right hand already resting heavily on the butt of his holstered service weapon. It was an aggressive, escalating posture textbook intimidation tactics designed to put a civilian on the defensive before a single word was spoken. "Keep your hands where I can see them! Do not move!" Stafford barked, his voice echoing loudly across the empty gas station lot. The rain continued to drizzle, but Stafford didn't seem to notice. He approached the Taurus at a sharp angle, keeping himself just behind the B-pillar of Isaiah's car to maintain a tactical advantage. "Good evening, officer," Isaiah said, his voice a calm, deep baritone. He intentionally kept his tone flat and unthreatening, utilizing the exact de-escalation techniques he taught at the academy. "How can I help you tonight?" Stafford stepped up to the window, shining his heavy tactical flashlight directly into Isaiah's eyes, deliberately blinding him, license, registration, and proof of insurance. "Now, I have them, officer," Isaiah replied, squinting through the blinding beam. "My wallet is in my right back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. Before I reach for them, I want to inform you that I am an off-duty police officer, and my badge and identification are inside my wallet." It was standard protocol. It was the right thing to say. But the words seemed to trigger something volatile in Stafford. "Did I ask you for your life story?" Stafford snapped, his voice rising an octave, thick with unearned authority and rising adrenaline. "I said, give me your ID." "Stop stalling." Isaiah kept his hands perfectly still on the steering wheel. He knew the danger of contradictory commands. "Officer, I am happy to comply. But if I reach behind me, you are going to see my weapon. I am carrying my department-issued firearm on my right hip, underneath my hoodie. I am going to move slowly. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Gun! He's got a gun! Stafford screamed, panic and aggression fusing into a deadly cocktail. In a fraction of a second, Stafford drew his Glock 17, stepping back and racking the slide, leveling the barrel directly at Isaiah's temple. Keep your hands on the wheel. If you move, I will blow your head off. Do you hear me? I will shoot you right here. Isaiah's heart hammered against his ribs, but his training immediately overrode his panic. Time seemed to slow down. He could see the slight tremor in Stafford's hands. He could see the white-knuckle grip the patrolman had on the weapon. He could see that Stafford's finger was inside the trigger guard, resting precariously on the trigger itself. One flinch, one misstep, one pothole nearby, and a negligent discharge would end Isaiah's life. My hands are on the wheel, Isaiah said, projecting his voice so it was loud, clear, and steady. He refused to break eye contact, staring directly into the blinding light. I am not moving. I am Detective Isaiah Montgomery, badge number 8842. I work out of the 8th Precinct. Call it in. Call your supervisor. Shut your mouth! Stafford shrieked. The patrolman was breathing heavily, his chest heaving under his Kevlar vest. He was entirely consumed by tunnel vision, suffering from a massive adrenaline dump that was blinding him to logic. You don't give me orders! You are a suspect in a vehicle matching the description of an armed robbery. You move a muscle, and I drop you. Armed robbery? Isaiah thought, his mind racing. It was a fabricated excuse. There had been no armed robbery call on the radio before he signed off his shift 20 minutes ago. Stafford was profiling, panicking, and now trying to retroactively justify pulling a gun on a compliant driver. Officer Stafford, Isaiah said, catching the man's nameplate in the ambient light of the gas station. Listen to my voice. I am on the job. You are escalating a situation that does not need to be escalated. My hands are visible. I am not a threat. I told you to shut up. Stafford pressed the muzzle of his gun closer, now mere inches from the glass, the laser sight painting a bright red dot on the side of Isaiah's cheek. The situation had spiraled completely out of control. An off-duty cop was sitting in his own car, trapped by the very uniform he wore to work every day, facing a man who was desperately searching for a reason to pull the trigger. The passenger door of the cruiser finally swung open. Officer Ryan Walsh scrambled out, looking entirely out of his depth. He was young, fresh out of the academy, his uniform looking a size too big for his slight frame. Seeing his partner with his weapon drawn, Walsh unholstered his own firearm, his hands shaking noticeably as he aimed it at the passenger side of Isaiah's car. "Derek, what's going on?" Walsh yelled, his voice cracking. "Suspect is armed and non-compliant." Stafford shouted back over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off Isaiah. "He's reaching. He's refusing commands. I am completely stationary." Isaiah shouted back, his voice cutting through the rain with undeniable authority. He shifted his gaze slightly to the rookie. "Officer Walsh, look at me. My hands are on the wheel. I am an off-duty detective. My badge is in my back pocket. Your partner is experiencing an adrenaline dump and is acting recklessly. De-escalate your partner." Walsh froze. He looked at Isaiah's hands, clearly glued to the 10 and 2 position. He looked at Isaiah's calm, authoritative face. Then he looked at Stafford, who was vibrating with misplaced rage. "Derek." "His hands are on the wheel," Walsh said hesitantly, lowering his weapon just an inch. "Maybe we should—" "I said keep your gun on him, Walsh," Stafford roared. "He's trying to manipulate you. He's a banger with a piece. Dispatch, we need backup now. Officer needs assistance." Code tries at the chevron on West Cattrith. Suspect is armed and uncooperative. Isaiah listened to Stafford screaming into his shoulder mic, spinning a web of lies that could get Isaiah killed. This was the nightmare scenario every officer of color talked about in hushed tones in the locker room. The badge was supposed to be a shield, a universal brotherhood. But in the heat of the moment, with the flashing lights and the blinding rain, Stafford didn't see a brother in blue. He saw a target. Out of the corner of his eye, Isaiah noticed movement by the gas station convenience store. A woman, wearing a bright yellow raincoat, had stepped out from under the awning. It was Sarah Bennett, a night shift nurse grabbing coffee before her rotation. Seeing the drawn weapons, she had stopped dead in her tracks. But instead of running, she pulled out her smartphone, held it horizontally, and began recording the entire interaction. Good, Isaiah thought. Keep filming. If I die tonight, the truth needs to survive. I'm going to ask you one more time to step out of the vehicle, Stafford ordered, his voice echoing off the metal canopy above them. Open the door from the outside and step out backward. It was a trap, and Isaiah knew it. Officer, if I move my hand to open the door, I am reaching toward my waist. You have your finger on the trigger. If I move, you will shoot me. I am not moving my hands from this steering wheel until a supervisor arrives. You are resisting a lawful order, Stafford yelled, taking half a step back, widening his stance in preparation to fire. I am preserving my life, Isaiah countered, his voice booming with the weight of a seasoned interrogator. He locked eyes with the frantic patrolman. You are violating department policy. You have no probable cause. You called in a fake robbery description. You are being recorded by that citizen by the store. If you pull that trigger, you are not committing a justified shoot. You are committing murder, and you will go to prison for the rest of your natural life. The mention of the camera made Stafford flinch. He darted a quick glance toward the convenience store and saw Sarah Bennett standing her ground, the lens of her phone pointed directly at him. The patrolman's face flushed deep crimson. He had lost control of the narrative, and he knew it. But his pride, fueled by a toxic ego and blinding prejudice, refused to let him back down. Walsh, cover him, Stafford ordered, stepping closer to the window, his gun still leveled at Isaiah's head. I'm pulling him out. Derek, wait, Walsh pleaded, his voice thin and laced with panic. Let's wait for the sergeant. He's on his way. The guy says he's a cop. He's a liar, Stafford spat, reaching his left hand through the open window toward the interior door handle. Do not reach into my vehicle, Isaiah warned, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. If you cross the threshold of this window, you are initiating an unlawful assault. Wait for your backup. In the distance, the wail of approaching sirens sliced through the night. The backup Stafford had so desperately called for was screaming toward them from multiple directions. Red and blue lights began to bounce off the distant buildings, reflecting in the puddles on the asphalt. Stafford smirked, a cruel, triumphant expression twisting his features. You hear that, tough guy? That's the cavalry. You're done. You're going face down in the mud, and if you twitch, you're going to the morgue. Isaiah didn't blink. He listened to the distinct, heavy rumble of the approaching engines. He knew the patrol cars of the 8th Precinct inside and out. He knew the shift schedules. He knew who was on duty tonight, because less than an hour ago he was sitting in the precinct briefing room with them. Stafford thought the arriving sirens were coming to rescue him from a non-compliant suspect. He thought the numbers would validate his aggression, that the badge he wore would automatically make him the hero of the standoff. Isaiah kept his hands perfectly still on the steering wheel, waiting for the cavalry to arrive. He watched Stafford's arrogant smirk grow wider as 3 patrol cruisers and a heavy black SUV careened into the gas station parking lot, tires screeching on the wet pavement, boxing Isaiah's car in completely. Doors flew open, and half a dozen heavily armed officers poured out, weapons drawn, tactically fanning out across the concrete. Stafford stepped back, keeping his gun raised, emboldened by the arrival of his peers. Get out of the car, he screamed, feeling invincible. Hands in the air. Now. But Isaiah didn't look at Stafford. He looked past the blinding spotlight of Stafford's cruiser, past the rain, and locked eyes with the man stepping out of the black SUV. Lieutenant Benjamin Ford, a 20-year veteran of the force, the shift commander of the 8th Precinct, and the man who had been Isaiah Montgomery's direct supervisor and close friend for the better part of a decade. The standoff had reached its climax, but the backup had not arrived for Officer Derek Stafford. The arrival of the backup units transformed the quiet Chevron gas station into a chaotic theater of blinding strobes and roaring engines. 6 officers, rifles and sidearms unholstered, moved with practiced, lethal precision, stacking up behind their engine blocks and opening their doors to create defensive perimeters. Through the torrential downpour, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Officer Derek Stafford stood tall, a smug, triumphant grin cutting across his rain-slicked face. He believed he had won. In his mind, he had corralled a dangerous suspect, controlled the scene, and was about to be the hero of the hour in front of his peers. "Get him out of the vehicle!" Stafford barked to the newly arrived officers, his voice dripping with adrenaline-fueled arrogance. "Suspect is armed, uncooperative, and reaching for his waistband. Let's drag him out." Lieutenant Benjamin Ford did not draw his weapon. A man whose imposing physical presence was matched only by his legendary calm demeanor under pressure, Ford stepped out of his black SUV and narrowed his eyes against the glare. He took in the tactical layout in a fraction of a second. The terrified rookie Walsh with a trembling gun, the defiant Stafford pointing a Glock point-blank into the driver's side window of a familiar Ford Taurus, and the absolute stillness of the driver inside. "Hold your fire. Hold the line." Ford's voice boomed over the wailing sirens, carrying the absolute authority of a shift commander. He strode forward, ignoring the tactical cover his officers were taking. Stafford's grin faltered as Ford bypassed the defensive line and marched directly toward him. "Lieutenant, he's got a gun. He matched the bolo for the armed robbery on the east side. I've got him pinned." Ford didn't even look at Stafford. His eyes were locked on the driver of the Taurus. He recognized the license plate. He recognized the dent on the rear bumper from a minor fender bender 3 months prior. And as he stepped into the cone of light, he recognized the exhausted, stone-still face of his best undercover detective, a man who had literally saved Ford's life during a cartel raid 2 years ago. "Isaiah?" Ford said, the disbelief evident in his gruff voice. "Evening, Lieutenant," Isaiah Montgomery replied, his hands still rigidly locked at the 10-2 position on the steering wheel. His voice was terrifyingly calm, completely devoid of the panic Stafford had claimed. "I'd reach for my badge, but Officer Stafford here has informed me that if I move a muscle, he's going to put a hollow point through my left temple." The atmosphere in the gas station instantly shattered and reformed. The officers behind Ford, veterans of the 8th Precinct who had shared coffee, danger, and endless shifts with Isaiah, lowered their weapons in unison. The click-clack of safeties engaging echoed rapidly across the pavement. "What?" Stafford stammered, looking frantically over his shoulder as the cavalry he had summoned stood down. "Lieutenant, no! He's lying! He's a suspect," Officer Stafford, Ford said, his voice dropping into a register of cold, suppressed fury. "Holster your weapon now." "Sir, you don't understand. I said holster your damn weapon, Stafford," Ford roared, the command cracking like thunder. "You are pointing a loaded firearm at Detective First Grade Isaiah Montgomery. Step back from that vehicle immediately." Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally pierced through Stafford's tunnel vision. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly under the fluorescent canopy lights. His hand shook violently as he slowly lowered his Glock, fumbling blindly to return it to his holster. Ford stepped between Stafford and the car window, effectively shielding Isaiah. Isaiah, you good? I'm alive, Ben, Isaiah breathed, finally dropping his hands from the steering wheel. The sudden release of tension made his shoulders ache. He reached into his back pocket, moving slowly, and produced his leather wallet. He flipped it open, letting his gold detective shield catch the light. Stafford, Ford barked, spinning around to face the trembling patrolman. You called in a code 3. You stated you had an armed, non-compliant suspect matching an armed robbery profile. What armed robbery? Stafford swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward Rookie Officer Walsh, who was now staring at the ground, utterly mortified. Dispatch. Dispatch put out a bolo. Liar, Ford snapped, stepping into Stafford's personal space. I monitor the primary dispatch frequency. There hasn't been a confirmed 10 to 30 armed robbery in this sector in 48 hours. You racially profiled a motorist, initiated an unlawful traffic stop, fabricated a felony to justify it, and then threatened to execute a decorated detective when he calmly identified himself. He got aggressive, Stafford pleaded, desperately trying to salvage his crumbling reality. He refused commands. Ask Walsh. Walsh saw the whole thing. Lieutenant Ford turned his piercing gaze to the young rookie. Officer Walsh, you are under a direct order from a commanding officer. Did Detective Montgomery act aggressively, or did your partner lose control of this scene? Walsh looked at Stafford, then at the badge gleaming in Isaiah's hand. The rookie took a deep breath, choosing his career and his conscience over the thin blue line. No, sir. The driver was fully compliant. He kept his hands on the wheel the entire time. Derek, Officer Stafford escalated the situation. He panicked, sir. Stafford lunged toward his partner. You little rat, I'll... Before Stafford could close the distance, 2 veteran sergeants tackled him against the side of his own cruiser. The metallic ratcheting of handcuffs being forcefully applied to Stafford's wrists echoed loudly in the rain. Officer Derek Stafford, Ford said coldly, watching the man get pinned against the slick metal of the patrol car. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You are under arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, filing a false police report, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Ford reached over, unclipped Stafford's badge from his chest, and yanked his service weapon from his duty belt. Get this disgrace out of my sight. Isaiah stepped out of his vehicle, the cold rain feeling like a baptism on his face. He looked over at the convenience store. Sarah Bennett, the night shift nurse, was still standing there, her phone still recording. She lowered it slightly, making eye contact with Isaiah. He gave her a single, solemn nod of gratitude. The system had almost failed him tonight, but the truth was captured in high definition. The fallout was catastrophic, rapid, and unyielding. The era of internal cover-ups had long passed, and the administration of the city's police department knew they were sitting on a powder keg. By 6:00 a.m. the following morning, the footage recorded by Sarah Bennett had been uploaded to social media. By noon, it had amassed 4 million views. It showcased the terrifying reality of the encounter. Isaiah's calm compliance contrasted violently with Stafford's unhinged, lethal aggression. Chief of Police Harrison Whitmore held a televised press conference that afternoon, publicly condemning Stafford's actions, formally terminating his employment, and handing the entire investigation over to the State Bureau of Investigation to ensure total transparency. The internal affairs investigation, spearheaded by Captain Jessica Rowland, was merciless. Rowland's team dug into Stafford's history and unearthed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Over his 5-year career, Stafford had accumulated 14 excessive force complaints, predominantly involving minority motorists. In the past, his previous precinct commanders had swept these infractions under the rug, citing lack of evidence and allowing him to transfer to the 8th precinct with a clean slate. This time, There was no rug large enough to hide the truth. The criminal trial of the state versus Derek Stafford began 8 months later. It was a media circus, a focal point for the national debate on police brutality and systemic prejudice. Stafford, stripped of his uniform and forced to wear a drab gray suit, sat at the defense table looking like a hollow shell of the arrogant man who had held a gun to Isaiah's head. The prosecution, led by District Attorney William Trent, dismantled Stafford's defense with surgical precision. Stafford's defense attorney attempted to argue that Stafford had experienced an understandable sensory overload and that the dark conditions had impaired his judgment. But the evidence was insurmountable. The jury watched Sarah Bennett's video. They listened to the radio dispatch recordings, which proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Stafford had lied about the armed robbery bolo. The most devastating moment of the trial came when Isaiah Montgomery took the stand. Dressed in his sharpest dress uniform, his chest adorned with medals of valor, Isaiah spoke with the quiet, commanding dignity that Stafford had tried to violently extinguish. "I have worn this badge for 15 years, Isaiah told the silent courtroom, his eyes locking onto the jury. "I have bled for this city. I have lost friends for this city. But on that night, to Officer Stafford, my service didn't matter. My compliance didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was his prejudiced perception of me. He didn't see a brother in arms. He saw a target. If I had flinched, if I had sneezed, if a loud noise had startled him, I would be dead, and he would have written a report calling me a thug, and many would have believed him." The karma that hit Derek Stafford was absolute and devastating. Judge Sylvia Carmichael, a no-nonsense jurist known for her strict adherence to the letter of the law, presided over the sentencing after the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts in less than 4 hours. "Mr. Stafford," Judge Carmichael said, looking down from the bench with icy contempt, "you were entrusted with the immense power of the state. You were given a badge, a gun, and the authority to police your fellow citizens. You weaponized that authority to terrorize a compliant man simply because you felt empowered by your own prejudice. You are a disgrace to the men and women who wear that uniform with honor." Stafford sobbed openly as the sentence was read. He was sentenced to 12 years in a state penitentiary, with a mandatory minimum of 8 years before the possibility of parole. Because he was a former police officer convicted of a violent felony, he was placed in a high-security protective custody unit 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, completely isolated for his own safety from the very people he used to police. His life completely unraveled. Due to the felony conviction, Stafford was stripped of his municipal pension. The financial ruin, coupled with the immense public disgrace, proved too much for his personal life. His wife filed for divorce 3 months into his sentence, taking custody of their home and cutting all ties. He lost his freedom, his career, his family, and his identity. As for Isaiah Montgomery, he returned to duty, but he was forever changed by the encounter. He transitioned out of undercover narcotics and accepted a position as an instructor at the police academy. He used his platform to overhaul the department's de-escalation training and implemented rigorous new protocols for implicit bias and crisis intervention. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a year after the incident, Isaiah sat in a crowded lecture hall looking out at 100 fresh-faced cadets. He projected a freeze frame of Sarah Bennett's video onto the large screen behind him the exact moment Stafford's gun was pointed at his head. "This is not policing," Isaiah told the hushed room, his voice echoing off the walls. "This is tyranny dressed in blue. Your badge is a shield for the innocent, not a weapon for your ego. The moment you forget that, you become the very threat you swore to protect this city from." He looked at the young men and women, the future of the force, and felt a profound sense of purpose. He had survived the darkest night of his life, not just to see another day, but to ensure that the officers he trained would never cast that kind of shadow over anyone else. The system was flawed, deeply and dangerously so, But men like Isaiah were determined to fix it from the inside out, one cadet, one truth, and one undeniable reckoning at a time. This gripping true story proves that karma has a way of balancing the scales when authority is abused. True justice requires brave witnesses and undeniable truth. If you were moved by Detective Montgomery's resilience and this intense real-life reckoning, please hit the like button, share this video to spread awareness about accountability, and subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories of justice served.